Greetings and welcome to the first podcast for Choose Wisely. Um, my name is Armin Gabrielli and I am your host. Some of you already know me. I started a podcast with a friend of mine under my organization, Guided Men. And we did a few, and I did mention also that another podcast would be coming soon, and that is Choose Wisely. I had originally planned to go into a long explanation as to why I chose that name. Let's choose wisely. But I'm going to deviate. That is going to come at another time. And that is because I chosen to talk about something else today for the first podcast. Something happened yesterday, and it was quite profound for me personally. My wife and I were watching a movie on Netflix. It was called The Soul on Fire. And it was a nice movie, so we thought. And it actually became much more powerful than what we originally thought. But either way, not to give too much away, it's about someone a young kid who was a burn victim. And the movie showed his struggles as he dealt with that, and he went through whatever kind of medical therapy and treatment was necessary for him to survive, and became an adult, and he became a whole lot of things. But what occurred while watching that movie? The movie did not show the emotional struggles, or it did not focus so much on the emotional struggles of this individual. And while watching the movie, um, actually, I was triggered. There was a point in which the young man was going through some stuff, and as I was watching him, even though the movie did not depict or focus so much on his emotional struggle, I understood his pain, and unaware, something opened up inside of me, and pain that I suppressed for decades, if not all of my life, it came up. And I just started crying. I just started crying. I just started crying for about 5, 10 minutes. And my wife was just consoling me. I couldn't even talk. I was just crying, 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 crying. And then afterwards, when I was able to start to talk, I was explaining to my wife that even though the movie didn't show it, that boy went through a lot of pain, a lot of emotional pain. It was significant. The funny thing is, through the movie, he was dismissing his pain. He was pushing it, but he was socializing, and people even asked him. He would just dismiss it as if it was nothing he was going through. He was significantly burned, and he was hiding his hands and so forth. And I understood everything that he was doing and why he was doing it. And I explained to my wife, who knows about my childhood and my experiences, especially my medical challenge. And what I explained to her is that I understood his pain, because while I explained to my wife being sick as a kid all the time, spending maybe 4 months, even though it wasn't consecutively, it would be weeks here, weeks here, weeks there in a hospital. Um, I always talked about how lonely it was, but I never talked about the pain that was associated with it. And my wife concurred that she never heard me talk about me experiencing or being in pain. But I saw that yesterday, and I did experience a lot of pain. I experienced a lot of pain growing up. And what I realized yesterday, as old as I am, 56, I never really dealt with a lot of my childhood pain. Even when I dealt with certain traumas, I would look at them as events. I would look at them as um, just things that I dealt with. And I never really paid attention to how much pain I suppressed. And I've been seeing a counselor who's been doing wonderful work with me. and she got me so much in touch with myself that I know I got to be careful because I've broken a wall. I've started to chisel at this wall that I put up that had all this pain that I felt most of my life hidden and locked away. And so from time to time, uh, depending on what's going on, pain can come up, and pain can come up and say, "Hey, I'm here. Yeah, I know you don't know I'm here because you put me away." Sometimes I would suppress pain immediately because I just had to do what I had to do, and I didn't have the time for it. One, two, I was trying to be strong for everybody around me, and as we know, the whole saying goes that men are supposed to raise their chin, stick out their chest, and just move forward. And that's what we did. But um, that's not a healthy thing. And the reason why I want to talk about that today is because I am glad to see that every time you turn around, there's so much talk about how men have been silently dealing with, or not dealing with, I should say, pain, and that it's time that we starting addressing it because it's not working for us. Um, I have to contribute. In fact, both podcasts is meant to help create a safe space for us men, and I mean us men of all shades, colors, cultures, no matter what, to really start talking about what pain we've been silently suffering with and finally dealing with it. We have been taught that men who deal with their emotions, who express their emotions, are weak, and it's so far from the truth. Actually, it's weakness not to, and it causes us to show up in manners that are very, very unhealthy. Um, but to get back to what I had experienced, um, we paused the movie for a while and we was talking and I was exploring and I was letting the feelings talk to me, if you will, and tell me, where did they come from? Remind me, at what points did I suppress these particular feelings? I grew up, I was born with asthma, you could basically say. First time diagnosed, I wasn't even 1 year old. And as simple as that may seem, or at least that's what I used to say, back then we didn't have the medication that we do now. There weren't inhalers, there weren't nebulizers, there weren't really much of anything. And when I got an asthma attack, more than likely I'd probably spend about a week or two in the hospital for them to restore my breathing. So I spent a lot of time alone as a child. And I focused, whenever I did talk about my experience as a childhood growing up sick, I talked mostly about the loneliness, but I didn't talk about the pain. It was hurtful. It was very hurtful. Um, it was hurtful to sit at a window, barely able to breathe, with an oxygen mask on, and watching all the kids in the neighborhood sit out, run outside, running and playing, having fun, while I was lying on a couch, barely able to move because I couldn't breathe well. It was painful spending my birthday and Christmas, which were 4 days apart, in the hospital by myself because I was sick. I had siblings. I had a brother. I had a sister eventually. And my parents couldn't spend all day at the hospital with me, with them. They were young. So they couldn't really stay. So instead of being home with them, I was in the hospital. And in addition to feeling lonely, it was painful. It was painful being in the hospital, watching other kids have a whole bunch of families around, and they looked like they were having the world of fun. And I wasn't, because I was by myself. That was painful. It was painful seeing kids come and go, spending maybe 2 or 3 days there, and I would spend a week to 2 weeks. Or I would spend a week, go home, and come back the very next day because I got sick again. I talked about the loneliness, but I didn't talk about the pain of it. Why did I suppress that pain? Part of it, I didn't want my parents to feel bad because they were doing the best they can. Part of it was I felt that I didn't have the right to feel pain because as I would walk around the ward with an IV in my hand and just walking around because I was bored, I saw kids suffering from much worse conditions than me. So I told myself, I don't have the right to feel pain. The loneliness, that's something you can't ignore. You're going to be lonely if you're alone. But I had no right to feel pain. So I suppressed that. And I always did. It was painful whenever I was with my friends and I couldn't engage in the athletics and the sports because I just couldn't handle it. I would lose my breath, or I didn't develop athletic skills because I didn't have the ability to practice and develop skills. So when it was time for teams to be chosen or members to be chosen of teams, I was the last one being chosen, if I was chosen at all. That was hurtful. That was very, very hurtful. Being alone, it retarded my development of social skills. And it caused me or left me to be socially inept, to where I would be in social settings and not know how to be. I didn't know how to be because I never was really, I never socialized much. So I didn't even know how to be. And as much as that made me feel awkward, there was a pain behind that too. And why I'm mentioning it now is because what I never did all this time was deal with that pain. I always compensated. I always tried to cover up. And when you cover up one thing, you wind up covering up other things. And that affected my relationship. It affected many things I did. Even my wife started crying. And after everything, I asked her why she cried. And she said, because the first time she saw real pain in me. And we had a conversation and realizing how much I suppressed pain, um, it kept us from getting as close as we could. And that's because I would always tuck that away. As far as I was concerned, I needed to be strong. My wife and I suffered a fetal demise, and when my daughter died, you would think under most circumstances that I would cry, but I didn't, because as far as I was concerned, I had to be the strong one. I had to be there to support my wife. I had to be there to make sure that everything was okay. I had to organize the funeral. I had to do this and that. I had to appear strong. And so I never cried in front of my wife. I never showed that pain. One day she did catch me wondering why I was taking such a long shower. And she didn't knock, she just opened the door and she saw me crying. And even when she saw me, I just immediately stopped crying, like something was wrong with it. And that's not a good thing. It's not a healthy thing. We were listening to, my wife and I, that is, we're listening to TD Jake's podcast with Jason Wilson. If you don't know who Jason Wilson is, look him up. Great guy to follow. And they had a caption over their podcast, and the caption was a quote from what they had said during the podcast, and that is that most men walk around with a broken boy inside them. And I had to think about it, and he was right. He was right. He was right. We do. We do. We cover up pain as if it's the norm, as if it's an obligation that we must do. And it's because we were taught to do that. But that is not a healthy thing to do. That is not something that we should do. We need to learn how to healthily address the pain that we've been carrying all these years, because we have been. Pain is never good. You cannot operate healthily. You cannot operate at your best if you're in pain. And just because you ignore pain doesn't mean that it's not affecting you. Um, I speak freely of it now, and I have a counselor. When I first started counseling 2 years ago, I used to go once. I used to have sessions once a week. I graduated, and then it went down to once a month. Now I have it maybe every other week. Um, and I continue because it's a healthy thing. The same way I take medication on a regular basis to manage other things like my asthma. I'm still an asthmatic, under control, thankfully. It's good to have things to manage our mental and emotional health and our spiritual health. And it's something that is good for us to get into. I will gamble that I probably have never run into a man who has not experienced some trauma in his life. Most of us have grown up with trauma, but it was natural to us. Words like trauma and trigger and these terms, they practically didn't exist. They weren't a real concept when anyone my age was growing up. So it was nothing. You just went along with your daily life and that was it. In fact, I didn't even realize that some of the things that I've been through as a child was trauma. I just knew it as life. And if you grew up in certain neighborhoods where most people lived the same way, then it was the norm. So you didn't look at it as anything but just the norm. And you went about your business, even though it was affecting us, it was changing us. Every time that we experience a significant trauma, it changes who we originally were supposed to be. What do I mean? I mean that we are born with a particular DNA that says what and who we are going to be, what our personality is going to be, how we're going to respond in any given situation. But when we experience significant trauma, that DNA changes. And until we address that DNA, until we address that trauma, until we address that trauma, then we are going to be subjected to be to respond to that initial trauma until we heal from that trauma. I want to help a phrase become a very popular phrase because I think it's so powerful. It's a phrase that I'm proud to say that my wife has said it during one of her speaking engagements. And she was speaking on healing and trauma. And she had said, trauma may not be our fault, but healing is our responsibility. Trauma may not be our fault, but healing is our responsibility. Since this whole podcast is based off of choosing wisely, I suggest to my brothers out there, start choosing to heal. Start choosing to recognize and understand. I would guarantee, I'm not a gambling person, but this is something I would gambling on. You've experienced some trauma. May not be too great, may be significant. Either way, I am sure if you look deep enough, you experience some trauma. And unless you've dealt with it, then it's something that I would urge you to deal with and heal from. And you'd be surprised at how much better life would be, how much happier, how much more joy you can experience, how much closer you can become to the people who matter to you, to the people in your circle. You'd be surprised at how much more you can do when you're unimpeded by pain, by trauma. And the thing is that we have such powerful minds. We could easily block the memory of traumas, but we cannot block the responses to trauma. Understand that. We may be able to block the memory of a trauma, but we cannot ever block the response to trauma. So let's choose to do the responsible thing. Let's choose to first identify our traumas and then heal from our traumas. This video is going to be posted on all my social media because I find the content very important. I'm happy to share it with you. Eventually, I'll have live podcasts because I would love immediate feedback and I would love dialogue. But for now, I share this with you. I hope it helps. And I look forward to reading some of your comments once this is posted. Until then, this is Armin Gabrielli saying, stay blessed. and have a great day.